Welcome to Comic Collecting 101, our first episode ever. I am Brannon,
I'm Sergio.
and we are here to talk to you about the basics of collecting comics. So we're going to start today, first episode, going over the very basics, the nuts and bolts of the hobby. And we'll probably mention some things that are a little advanced, and we'll get into the specifics of those later, and we'll let you know when that's something that you can ignore for the time being. But we know that there are a lot of podcasts, video casts, all kinds of stuff out there talking about like get these comics, top 10 unknown comics, 5 comics for speculation, etc., etc. And it can be really overwhelming. But some people just want to read some books, and you'll get into collecting and stuff later when you determine what it is that you like to read. So we're here to fill that void for you. We're going to tell you about the materials involved, the media involved, the different formats of books, everything that we can possibly cram into a 20-minute period to get you going on the road to collecting comics. So, Sergio, I know you have a great interest in the actual history of comics. So why don't you give everybody a quick rundown of the history of collecting?
All right, so comics pretty much hit it big right around World War II in the 1940s, but people weren't really collecting them. They were kind of like pulps, and people would pick them up, read them, throw them in the garbage. Comics have been found anywhere from old dusty boxes to they've been used to insulate houses. Ohio, right? Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk
about
that later.
So it was right around the Silver Age, which is the 60s and the 70s, that people started picking up and collecting books. They were like, man, these are really cool. Granted, there were some guys that were already, even back then, saying, hey, some of these things are going to be worth money one day. But for the most part, people are like, hey, I really like Superman. I really like Batman. I want to start collecting these stories so that I can pass them on to my kids, or we can trade them with my friends, whatever. So around the 60s, 70s, comic book collecting is when it started. Around the 80s is when it really, really picked up big. Because some of these Golden Age books, they were only about 40 years old. So you can kind of pick them up here and there. Conventions started picking up, at the war memorials and the Indian casinos, things like that. Anywhere that comic collectors can gather, they'd gather and they'd put on shows. That's about the time that creators started coming out to meet the fans, sit down at a table and sign their books, talk about their books. They'd have panels so that they can answer questions, for the people that couldn't get their letters printed in the back page, in the mailbox of those comics.
Letter hacks,
yeah.
Which is something we will talk about at some point, I'm sure.
Of course. The 90s came around and kind of crapped on everything. You'll see these books everywhere once you actually start going into shops. Mass produced. You'll see them there, these chromium covers. Everything was chrome. It was also around the time we were starting to feel the fallout of Frank Miller's type of storytelling. Everything got super dark, super gritty. Capes, heroes like Superman and Wonder Woman, they kind of took a back seat to your grittier heroes like Spawn, the Punisher, the Max. Then things kind of happened, and then we were kind of already in the modern age now, which is kind of sad now that I think about it, because it kind of means that the 90s never really ended. Because right now, if you go to a shop, you're pretty much just going to see chromium covers, lenticular covers.
Yeah, all over the place, every month.
So anyway, so let's say you want to get into comic book collecting, right? And like Brandon said, everybody's telling you what you should read. Pick a character you like. If it's Batman, it's Batman. If it's Wonder Woman, it's Wonder Woman. It doesn't really matter. With all these movies coming out and everything happening nowadays, it's really easy to get into the hobby. Right? You can walk out of a movie theater, walk right into a comic shop, and start reading comics. So, Brandon, what would be the easiest way for a new person to start reading any character?
Well, first you need a starting point, and so many different characters have different starting points because the more popular characters, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, these are golden age heroes, been around since the 30s and 40s in a lot of cases, and then even the more classic Marvel characters, Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, they've been around since the 60s, and some characters have been around since before Marvel was Marvel. They were timely, and they're from that period in the 40s and 50s. A lot of characters have a lot of points where you can jump on and start a story. And if you start at a later point, you can go backwards. That's never a problem. The way to determine where you want to start is, like Sergio said, pick a character, but look for an art style that you like. Look for writing that you enjoy. And you can pick up a book in a store and thumb through it and figure out, does this really suit me? And the best way to get a whole story arc in is with a trade paperback. And we actually have one here. Now, this particular story isn't necessarily where you want to start on your comic voyage. If you decide to blow me off and do that anyway, more power to you. It's an excellent read. This is V for Vendetta by Alan Moore, made into a movie back in 2004, 3, something
Natalie
like that.
Portman.
Yeah. But as you can see, it's a little bit thicker than a regular comic book. This particular one, I believe, collects a 9-issue series. A lot trades can be anywhere from collecting 3 or 4 issues all the way up to
An essential or an omnibus.
An essential or an omnibus that collects even more. And an omnibus doesn't have to collect a whole lot of issues, but in this case, we're looking at what we got here.
Oh, dude, I don't even know.
Captain America 206 to 230, Annual number 4, and Incredible Hulk 232. And when you look at these, they'll say $19.99 or $29.99 on the back, but you can go on Amazon and find them for less. Amazon generally sells trades and collected editions at a little bit less than the manufacturer's suggested retail price, MSRP. So you do have those options available to you. You don't need to read every single issue in a collected edition. When you look at an omnibus like that, you're looking at a situation where they've collected a large run of issues. Like I said, Captain America 206 to 230. So 206 to 230, that's going to cover multiple story arcs. You don't have to read all of that. You could pick an issue, jump around, whatever you like. In the case of the V for Vendetta, that actually was an entire storyline. So in that case, you'll have to familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of the stories. So something to be on guard for if you decide to go pick up some trades. If my opinion matters at all to you, which if you're watching this video, hopefully I've made enough of an impression where you care. I'm a big Spider-Man fan. You don't need to start at the beginning with Spider-Man. There are some great spots in Amazing Spider-Man where you can start. Where John Romita Jr. was doing the art, which I'm a big fan of. Late double digits, early triple digits, the hundreds. Great storylines in there. Great new characters introduced. Great old characters leaving the series. Really good stuff. And then, or you could pick up later on. You could pick up in the 300s with
Venom.
With the Venom series, where Todd McFarlane started doing the art for Spider-Man for the first time. Lots of really good story material in there, and even reading through the 300s. And some of those, the earlier 300 books are a little expensive because Todd McFarlane's work is more in demand. But those other books in the 300s, save for like the first appearance of Carnage, 361, I think it is. Aside from those, you can get a lot of those books in dollar bins. I've found a lot of my collection of Spider-Man. That's actually where I started as an adult. I collected comics as a child into my early teens. Fell out of the hobby because I started playing video games and stuff. And then as an adult, I got back into comics maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And one of the reasons I started was I found where I was living at the time in New Hampshire, a place called Chris's Cards and Comics. They had 50-cent bins. Tons of books from all kinds of series. Batman, X-Men, Spawn, Spider-Man, all kinds of stuff. All the overprinted stuff from the 90s you could pick up for 50 cents a piece. And if you went in on a holiday, like a Christmas sale or Black Friday sale, They marked them down to a quarter. So I mean, 4 books for $1, couldn't beat it.
Actually, hold on. On that note, since you mentioned marking stuff down to a quarter, and you mentioned Amazon earlier, walking into a comic book store for the very first time could be kind of intimidating, especially when you walk in and you look at the back and you see $19.99. You're like, man, I'm about to spend $20 on something that I don't even know if I'm gonna like it, right?
Yeah.
That's where that dollar bin comes in. Walk over to that dollar bin, pick out some single issues. This is a single issue. They range anywhere between $3, $5 if you're picking up a Marvel book nowadays. But you can normally find these.
Well, there are some special editions that'll run you like $6, $7, $8. Those are usually variants. You don't always have to pick up. Sometimes I think DC has something called a Prestige issue. It's a single issue, a little bit longer of a story, and they'll run $8 generally.
Yeah. So that dollar bin, Spiderman. Walk over, find Spiderman, and just start pulling out random issues.
And you can usually find issues in a row. Like they may not all be sequential. You may need to fill in a couple of gaps on your by visiting multiple stores. But at a single store, you can usually pull the dollar books or the 50-cent books in a row.
I pulled my entire Spider-Woman collection from the dollar bin.
There you go. My Birds of Prey, except for number 8 from the early 2000s, Chuck Dixon, excellent work. I got all those out of a dollar bin. I think 1 through 26. It's a great way to start a collection. I mean, you don't have to. The great thing about dollar bins is you can grab a couple books and take them home and read them, $3 or $4 worth maybe, and come back later, and you can read 4 issues in a day or two, and make it back to the shop with enough time to be sure that good chance no one else has picked through and taken the other books from that series.
Absolutely.
So the dollar bin is a great place to start, not just reading, but also if you decide you want to collect a series, dollar bins are a great place to start.
You know, that's now the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to get at, right?
Yeah.
So once you start collecting, right, trying to save you some money too in this endeavor that we're putting together. So you don't have to bag and board. You don't have to bag and board every single issue, right? If you're picking up these dollar books, it's perfectly fine to put them in a shoebox and just leave them loose, right? This habit of bagging and boarding every issue is from the belief that, well, you know, the random issue of Zap Comics from 1947 is worth like $3,000. Yeah, absolutely. The random issue of Zap Comics is worth $3,000.
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many issues of Zap Comics. But if you go pick up Turok #1 or Amazing Spider-Man #1,
inside joke.
you know, these things are everywhere. Sometimes you'll go to the store and you'll pick up your books and you get home and there's a Turok #1 because the guy behind the counter just wanted to get rid of it and he just slipped it into your bag. These things are everywhere. Those books, there's absolutely no need to bag and board them. Perfectly fine. If you just want to read them and throw them away, perfectly fine. We're talking about collecting. So you want to keep them, store them in a nice safe place so you can have them for later. You start picking up your key issues, that's when you start bagging and boarding. Not really saying that Aquaman #1 New 52 is a key issue, but it sort of is.
So I'll be completely honest with you. I bag and board just about everything I buy. Bagging and boarding is my least favorite part of the hobby. I do it because I like to protect everything. I like to keep them in nice condition. Not because I think it's gonna be worth something someday, but I've had a lot of turnover in my collection. Collected things for a while, got tired of it, decided to move it to build capital to collect something else. Comics are not my only passion. You know, there are other things that I collect or like to do. So, you know, I sometimes you need money and you want to refocus. And in that case, you know, you may bag and board because you want maximum resale value, or you just want the person that it goes to next. If you're actually selling to another collector and not a dealer, you just want them to have it in as good a condition as you had it. I did read the books that I bought new. I don't buy new books so much anymore. I'm more collecting older stuff, getting caught up on everything that I've missed since I've only really been collecting seriously for the last 5 or 6 years, like I mentioned. But you don't need to bag and board. But if you want to, you absolutely can. And on that note, I want to say that you can buy, if you're only buying a couple issues, perfectly acceptable to pay a quarter for each already inserted board into a bag that they have by the register in your local comic shop or LCS. But I buy my own materials. I was bagging and boarding so much before that I would just shell out on my own. I think a bag of bags is like $8 and a bag of boards is $10 or something like that. Some places may be cheaper, some places may be more. There's different types of bags. You don't need My Lights. You don't need to pay that premium. If you want to, by all means. I have a few comics that I keep in turtle shells, which are the hard top loaders that you may have, like large versions of the hard shell top loaders that you may have kept baseball cards in at some point in your life. You don't need to have those. Like, I do it because I like to do it. I like to protect my stuff. But Sergio bags a lot of his stuff, but doesn't board. If it's a book that he knows he cares about that's going to stay in his collection for a long time because it's a character that he likes, like Harley Quinn.
It's all bagged and boarded.
He gets bags and boards at the register. It goes right into the bag before he leaves the shop.
Yeah, but my Spider-Woman's, not a single one is bagged or boarded. My All-Star Squadrons, 54 issues, not a single one is bagged and boarded. I've got a pretty decent run of Green Lantern, not bagged and boarded, just because I'm going to keep them. I'm probably going to pass them on to my kid later so he can read them. But I mean, they're not ever going to be worth anything. I don't plan on ever selling them. They're just going to stay with me. So there's no need. So going back, no need to spend that $8. $18 total on bags and boards just to bag and board if I'm not really going to use it. Real quick before we finish, there's 3 types of, actually, you know what? We're at 17 minutes. I think we should cut it.
Before we go, I want to give you a recommendation, just a place to start. So I mentioned Spiderman in a couple spots. There's a lot of big characters and stuff, but I think an underrated place to start with comics are there are these series for DC called Showcase. And there's Showcase from the 60s, Showcase from the 70s, there's Showcase from the early 90s. And basically they spotlight different characters, new characters, up-and-coming characters and stuff for a couple issues at a time. If you pick up the books, they're very expensive, but the individual books. But DC happens to make Showcase in large collected editions like this. They don't call them Essentials. They call them something else, like DC Golden Age Heroes, Silver Age Heroes, something like that. But I would look into that because since you're getting a whole bunch of first appearances or initial solo stories in one shot, you have the starting point for a number of different stories within one book, and that's a great help just to get a couple of different books, a couple of different characters under your belt. Otherwise, it's really up to you. Find an artist you like. Like, oh, the cover looks cool. That's how I started reading JSA. I thought the cover of a book looked cool. That's how I started reading Jeff Johns' Green Lantern. I thought the Brightest Day, Blackest Night covers were cool, so I was like, let me snatch those.
Now that he says, look, I'm going to be totally honest with these people. You're getting into comics, right? Forget your favorite character. Find a book written by Jeff Johns. I'm dead serious, people. Serious.
It's really good stuff.
Find a book written by Jeff Johns.
Really good stuff, yeah.
Start reading. Doesn't matter what character. Just start reading it. You will fall in love.
Let's amend that. Pick up something. Like if you made the decision to get into it, you're going to buy more than one thing. Pick up something that you want to check out, and pick up Green Lantern or JSA or something by Jeff Johns. It really, you can't go wrong. That's Jeff Johns.
This is Jeff Johns.
Green Lantern by Jeff Johns. I think Volume 3.
Yeah.
Amazing series. It's only like 76 issues too, something like that.
We'll get into that later in other videos. We'll talk about different runs, different writer runs. Like one of my favorites is Kevin Smith's Green Arrow run.
I've actually never read
It's
that.
like volume 3. It was amazing. But we're at 20 minutes. I know we've taken up a bunch of your time. Leave a comment below. Let us know what you want to see on this channel. Let us know if you want us to change anything. Other than that,
if you're a more advanced person who happened to drop by, please let us know what you think we should talk about.
Absolutely.
If you are a retailer or you work in a comic shop, let us know what kind of questions you get on a regular basis so we can answer those and get this information disseminated to the people coming into the hobby, because we do want to make your transition into comic collecting as simple as possible. But with that, again, I'm Brannon.
I'm Sergio.
And we'll see you next time on Comic Collecting 101.
Deuces.